welcome to the awesome day of FileMaker Training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTrain.tv, where every day is an exciting day where we're learning about the FileMaker platform. So, to bring us up to date with the action-packed week that we've had thus far, Tuesday, Claris launched the latest version of the Claris FileMaker platform, which was 2024 is the marketing sales name. If you refer to the version number or you're a technical person, then you call it FileMaker 21 or just 21, right? And so that shipped out Tuesday morning. So those of you who have a current license for it that's currently active, then what you will see is you will get an email from Claris at some point or from someone whoever sold you your licenses with the downloads and updates to that. Very exciting. First 2 days of the show were Claris product managers coming in to kind of do an overview. Then yesterday we did a deep dive, really one of the better videos I have seen done in a while. And I have a pretty high threshold level quality, and Wim Decorte killed it yesterday, a little backstopping from other people, but it was really, really quite good. Wim did a great job. So yesterday's recording is being cleaned up and edited. I would loosely call it a FileMaker Server 2024 or 21. SSL overview with introduction to Let's Encrypt. I think it's not the definitive Let's Encrypt conversation. I think that's probably forthcoming at some point, but it was a really great opener. So today is kind of an open Q&A. So Wim got done what he wanted to get done yesterday with Let's Encrypt. And so today is going to be an open conversation with two of the the two smartest FileMaker Server people I have ever met. Wim Decorte from Soliant, good organization, and Wim himself is fantastic. So whenever you see Wim talking, mostly is about servers and security and making sure that both of those are boring topics. If your security or your server ever get exciting, something's wrong. It should never be exciting. And today's open Q&A with him. Jacob Taylor is RCC's kind of variant on Wim, and so a younger version of Wim. And these two, when they talk, if you could obscure their voices and make it a computer voice, you'd never quite be sure who you were talking to because they say the same things, which makes a very interesting conversation. So today we're here with Wim. I'm going to be triaging the questions that you folks ask. So if it's about FileMaker Server or something that I determined to be sufficiently interesting or maybe security related, then I will dive into that, right? David Angel asked a question yesterday, was reading Wim's subject about SSL. He uses SSLS.com. SSLS.com has an intermediate cert ? Intermediate cert is trust, right?
SSLS is just a seller, right? They're not a provider of certificates, meaning they don't issue the certificate. They're just a go-between to get the certificate. The certificate itself will come from Positive SSL, Komodo, DigiCert, wherever, because those are the ones that are allowed to issue your certificate. So think of SSLS as just a shop where you go, right? But the product comes from somewhere else. So the intermediate bundle, the one that you need to prove that chain of trust that we talked about at length yesterday, it's such a crucial piece of thing, needs to come from whoever issues you the certificate, right? The one that actually signs the certificate, that's where you have to go for the bundle. Most of the certificates that I get through SSLS, I would have to look it up which is the actual provider. I think it's something with Komodo. They just email it. I don't have to go hunting for it. But sometimes kind of depends on who the certificate authority is. You'll have to go to their website, not SSLS, but the actual website of the actual certificate authority, and download the intermediate bundle from there.
So I guess there's a question here. I misunderstood. I thought they were talking about your shirt, Jacob, being so orange and interesting, but they're talking about the lock in the corner of the window, right?
Yep.
And so red lock means there's no SSL, no nothing. Orange or yellow lock means it's kind of what I would refer to as kind of half SSL. So it's SSL, but it's the intermediate trust component's not there. Something's not totally correct about it. And then if it's green, if it's has full goodness, right? I don't know, however if you want.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Right. Red can indicate several different things. Also, for example, like the clients that we've had that see a red SSL, they have an SSL in their FileMaker server, but they don't have a network that's capable of doing hairpinning or something like that. Split horizon DNS would be the other way that you'd accomplish that. And so basically they like put the local IP of their FileMaker server into their Pro because it's in their office or whatever. They were good. They still got the SSL. They have offsite, users or something like that, but they're like using residential networking hardware or something like that. And a lot of those, not all, but a lot of them don't support hairpinning. They can't run a local DNS or something like that where you can announce things and pretend that the FileMaker server has that same IP address internally and a different one externally. That's called split horizon DNS. And so if you can't do either of those two things, you're still trying to connect to the server. It, in some ways, is perfectly valid and good for SSL purposes, but you're not able to set it up in a way where FileMaker can track everything down perfectly.
I'm going to recap what Wim said yesterday because he did such a great job with this. But the important part is a reminder is that the SSL certificate provides encryption point to point, but it also it establishes trust, right? And the way that works is that your server has to have a name like donkeykong.com or something. It's a domain, and the SSL certificate is attached to that. So you have to be able to type in www.donkeykong.com and have it go to your FileMaker server, your website. And that's the way that works. If you're going to your web server, your FileMaker server, web server, any server with an IP address, the SSL won't be fully happy, if that makes sense, right? Part of that, the SSL turning green and making sure it's all happy is they have a valid domain and that's functional, right? Did I say that correctly, Wim?
You got it. Like I said, the encryption, that's the obvious part, the benefit that you get from an SSL certificate. The other one is the name validation, right? Like the name that I'm using to connect, got to be the name that's on the certificate. Otherwise, they say like you're trying to call me Richard and I'm Wim. Like there's no match there.
But I could try to pretend I'm Wim because I think Wim's awesome and I want to take over his life. So I build a server called wim.soliant.com or something, but they can see that my server isn't really named that way. So
right.
That's the missing trust part, right? Connecting to the name. Jacob, if you want to share your screen, and then that will probably spawn questions. We're going to look at the FileMaker. This is so what you're looking at here is a Mac, but we're logged into the administrative console, and this is a 2024 server, a.k.a. once again down here at the bottom. It's actually called 21, and this is version. Basically, Build 51 is the number that I'm interested in. This is running on Linux, right? People say, what is this running on? What did you install this on, Jacob? What is this on?
This is a T4G large, which is, I think, the second generation Graviton processors from Amazon, which are their ARM processors. Would be the same thing that's in your phone, except bigger because it's server, lots of cores and RAM and things. So not like a phone in that sense.
It's a good choice of basic hardware for as an entry point. It's sort of like my default. My default too is to use the Ubuntu, the Linux server, right? There's a really good reason for that, right? So let me just postulate that because that may spark some questions. If you were at Engage, you will have heard that from Clay Michael and from other people there. In Claris's mind, Linux is the premier platform for FileMaker Server above all else. So whatever features they build first, they will build first for Linux and then port, if they think it's necessary or required, port to macOS and Windows. And I think that fact alone should be enough reason to at least pay attention to what the Linux version of FileMaker Server can do for you. And we see that, like if we look at some of the features like HTTPS tunneling, which only exists on the Linux version, right? So and it's a crucial feature. Happy to go into that, but it's a sign that they are treating the Linux version as the number one platform. Not to say that they're not paying attention to the other ones, but that's the main one that they develop on.
David Angel says he took a screenshot. It's on Discord. If you folks see that, it's it basically says he's got a domain that's $3.75 a year. Komodo SSL. That's pretty cheap.
Yep.
And I think, to be honest with you, if I could speculate briefly, Let's Encrypt has applied downward pressure to the sales models for these companies. Without them, this would be $149 a year, I'm sure, at least. So
yeah, GoDaddy actually raised their prices, honestly. Like people on live stream that are our customers may know we tend to recommend GoDaddy for SSL, to be perfectly honest, because our clients can buy things and they don't have to deal with any of the domain, the DNS, or any of that stuff. They can just directly delegate account access to me, and then I can do everything for them, basically. But it's not free. And so at some point, or not free, not cheap, sorry, I should
Not
say,
cheap,
since we're
yeah.
talking about
Not
Let's Encrypt, which is actually free. I usually use that as a turn of phrase to be like, it could be cheaper. No, literally, it could be free, actually.
Yep. So this is so it's the entry level server. So would you say it's the T, because the T's have when I started using T's, they were
T4G.
G4 Golf, which is the Graviton, which is the ARM processor. So this is Linux, and this is what, an 8 gig or 6, what, an 8 gig and four cores, 2 cores, however
Two
many
cores.
2 cores. So good for how many people, Jacob? And I know that's totally subjective, right? But 5 people.
Less than 20.
Yeah, less than 20 for sure.
It's funny, right? It's like we see this question on the community forums all the time. Like it's like asking the question, what is a good car? And it depends on what
Exactly.
what do you want to do with it, right? Like, do you want to do like a sub 2 seconds on the Nordschleife on the circuit, or do you want to cross the desert with it? Kind of depends. Like, it's a different kind of animal, right?
So Schmiegel, I have questions for whatever they're relevant. Please explain. Okay, here we go. Okay, the one area where Wim and Jacob Taylor tend to potentially disagree, and so Schmiegel, of course, wanders right into that. Please explain why having a low cache is recommended. I have 132 gigs of RAM and nothing else on the server, I guess. But the server is running, FileMaker server's been running on the machine, but it's been recommended I keep the cache low on the FileMaker server. I still don't understand why I use the RAM cache that I have, and I wouldn't help. And this gets back to our recommendation versus Wim's recommendation versus whatever. 132. I mean, okay, let me ask Schmiegel, how big is your data set? Right? Like, if you make one backup, forget the containers, just if you look at the FMP12 files, what is one set of your databases? How fat are those? He says it's huge. Okay, huge is subjective. Huge to okay.
Your definition of huge and mine are
Huge,
not in alignment.
7 gigs, so that's
7 is not huge.
But okay, let's go. It's huge for him.
It's not tiny. Yeah.
It's not tiny. Okay. So let's talk about, so Wim, what is your recommendation loosely? I mean, we don't know about, he didn't say anything about WebDirect or anything like that.
The thing is that there's this perception that database cache, or the setting for database cache on the FileMaker server side, is like a magical dial. Like, the higher, the more performance you'll get, which is not true, right? It goes back to the fact that FileMaker Server isn't one thing, right? FileMaker Server is a collection of processes. They'll all need their memory. They'll all need to have room to play. The database engine, which is where the cache comes into play, is it's obviously the crucial role for a FileMaker Server, but it's only one of the roles, all right? So the higher you set your database cache, the more memory you monopolize, because FileMaker Server doesn't share the database cache with any of its other processes or the operating system. So the higher you set that, the more that you monopolize that. And I bet for a database or database set of that size, kind of depends on how many users, that stuff, like, you're only going to use a tiny fraction of that. There's a reason that the default is only like half a gig. The proper answer is FileMaker Server gives us metrics trapped in the stats log and the topical stats, the stats log. I should be, they're not in the topical stats log and the stats log. Use them, right? They'll tell you whether there's any pressure on your database cache. Set it higher when you need to, but when I say higher, don't jump from half a gig to 10 gigs, right? Like, jump from 512 to maybe 1 gig, and that's probably going to solve whatever pressure that you have. Maybe go up to 2 gigs.
Can we walk? Can you? Well, you tell Jacob what to do, but can we walk through? Let's review where do we see the pressure, and how do we see? What does that look like on the web interface here? Right. So
sure. If we go to the logs and we pick stats logs, and actually this is one of the changes in FileMaker 21, because the logs have always been off by default, which I think was borderline criminal, if I'm honest. When you install a fresh FileMaker Server 21, the logs are on by default, which is a great thing, because you don't want to be flying blind. The stats log gives us metrics. Every server has 4 potential bottlenecks. It's going to be memory, processing, disk I/O, and network. The stats log gives us metrics on all 4 of those. The ones that deal with the memory, those are the ones that are relevant for the database cache, are basically your cache hit percentage and cache unsaved percentage. So there's 2.
Okay, where's that at? I'm looking at the screen here. How do I find the cache hit percentage and stuff like that? Jacob Taylor?
You'll probably need to move sideways a
It's
little.
not
there we
it's
go.
not being
There we go.
displayed because I have a 720p screen for the stream.
Yep.
I'm
and
sorry.
their stats display does not fit on screen.
Okay, so
Yeah,
this is the point. So stats log right here, everyone, and then you're gonna it comes down. Then you're looking. This is the pressure. So what is pressure? If I say what is pressure, what is that like? Bad pressure? Is that good pressure or bad? And I'm asking dumb questions here just because people are gonna ask these questions, right? What are these questions? What's a good number?
Yeah, both of those numbers are good, right? Cache hit percentage means that whatever request FileMaker Server receives, it can answer out of cache 100% of the time. That's what that means. That's good, right?
What about this one over here?
So cache unsaved at 0 is also good. That means that there's nothing left in cache that hasn't been written to the hard drive yet. So 0 is a good number.
Okay.
Typically, the best practice is that if your cache hit percentage is below 95%, 95%, if it goes below that, that's bad, right? That means that FileMaker Server is getting requests for data from clients, Data API, FileMaker Pro, Go clients, WebDirect clients, and it cannot answer from cache. So that means that it'll have to go to the disk to go and get the data for whatever that client is asking for. That's bad. That's slow. So good and bad is really in terms of performance. It's having to go to the disk is slower than just using the memory, right?
Okay. And then this number over here, that should be what, 0 to 10% or something, or what?
0 to 5, something like that. Typically, you'll see these numbers fluctuate a little bit at the moment a backup happens, because FileMaker is then suspending the operation to the client at the tail end of a backup. So it's normal to see them fluctuate, but they shouldn't consistently be at a number of, say, 95 for the cache hit and higher than 0 for the unsaved.
All right, so everyone up to date on pressure. So pressure is workload on the server. In other words, saying how hard is your server working, and if it's struggling. And so how you check that is you go to the logs, you go to stats logs, you scroll to the right. You're looking for cache hits, cache unsaved. So you want above 95% here, ideally, and you want 0 to 5% here. And those are good.
You want to look at, Richard, question for you. Do you want to look at DBW4 specs?
Yeah, you can do that. It's not going to be as long as you don't expose a password or something. So this is RCC's corporate.
Production server that pays everybody.
How do we find the numbers on that? Where are they?
They're on screen. They're not laid out super well.
Okay, well.
So you have cache hit and cache unsaved in the top right.
Really? Okay. I would think it'd move a little bit. Well, the problem is we're not seeing it live, right? So you want to see it live? Can you get into live without?
I can click between them. These are our metrics. So they're measurements taken every 5 minutes.
Okay. Let's keep motoring forward.
You can click through. I think I'm going backwards in time actually, but yeah, it's 1250. So I can go all the way. You can see the timestamps in the bottom.
Okay.
Tiny screen problems.
Not moving too much.
Yeah, you got some like lapse time per call here, disk kilobytes per second, some numbers moving around. For the most part,
pretty quiet.
We're perfect on cache details and stuff like that.
If you see those numbers consistently around 100% and 0%, there's actually zero benefit in upping the database cache, right? Because you're just wasting memory at that point.
And that's and with that memory could be taken away from the other process. Jacob, can you go back? Can you show the processes running? I don't care if it's Mac, Windows, or Linux. They're essentially the same processes. So the FileMaker, I'll just recap this as Jacob figures this out. FileMaker Server is not one program, okay? If FileMaker Pro is a program, a single program that runs on your Mac or Windows. Go is a app that runs on your iPhone. FileMaker Server is what, 5, 6, 7 little programs?
Eight or more, depending on what features you enable.
8, there we go. Yeah. So it's that's why you're here to keep me out of trouble. So it's 8 little programs. They call them processes, but at the end of the day, it's a little program from our perspective that runs. And these 8 of these things are talking to each other. There we go. Here's Windows. And you do a search for something like FileMaker or whatever, you'll see, oh, there we go. So FileMaker Server is an amalgamation of all these things through here. That is one installation of FileMaker Server. And so Wim's saying that this is the main process here, I think, or it just moved down.
Yes.
It's not you, this is live data. So if you increase the cache, we're going to give it more cache. The cache only feeds this part right here. And if you're constrained with RAM memory, which most people kind of are, like Schmiegel has 132 gigs, but say you had 16 and you gave 6 or 7 gigs away to this process right here, that means that maybe there's only 10 gigs left for all the rest of this, plus the entire operating system, the OS over here, right? I'm making a hell of a mess of this, but say we say, well, that's not good. We want it to go faster. So you give it 10 gigs just to this process. Now there's only 6 left. And so these other processes may suffer, right? Because they're not going to stop working. They just go slower when they start running out of memory. So I'm going to clear
exactly. You're forcing the operating system to offload from memory onto the disk, right? That's the definition of a swap file. So it'll function.
Explain what a swap file. That's a fundamental here. Explain what that is.
Yep, and there's actually some new features in FileMaker Server 21 on the Linux side to enable a swap file. A swap file is it's sort of like your call it like the memory overflow, right? Like you have your amount of actual RAM installed in random access memory, physically installed as chips.
Yeah, we got 6. I'm going to give you a number. We got 16 gigs. There we go.
Yeah. So the operating system and all the processes together need some of that memory, and it's fairly dynamic, right? So they claim some memory, they release some memory as they go. Say perfect storm, they all require a lot of memory at the same time. What the operating system is going to do is going to say, I got some things that are stored in memory that I haven't used in a little bit. I'll take a snapshot of that. That's not the accurate term, and I'll write it to the hard drive so that I can basically load it back if I need it. Right? That's what swapping means. It's going to swap real memory space for hard drive space. You can imagine that that's not very fast.
Yeah. So say we have a 16 gig machine, and suddenly the computer, for whatever reason, decides it needs 20 gigs. It's got to come up with 4. So it's going to take 4 inactive. It hopes they're inactive, move them off. And so it's using 4 gigs off the hard drive effectively is what happens. So
exactly. And if another process that was using that memory that's now on drive, the operating system will have to say, oh, hold on a second, I'll go grab that from the drive, load it back into memory, and now you can use it, right? So that's why it's not a good idea to do that.
And you have to wait for that entire drive loading process that he just described. I hope you're on an SSD. It's still going to be slow.
So if you look at a FileMaker server, the only reason to have lots of memory in a FileMaker server really is if you have a lot of WebDirect or server-side activity beyond the database engine, right? And typically that would come from WebDirect sessions. But okay. I would say if you have a lot of WebDirect, you probably want to be using worker machines, right? So that you can offload that to their own machine and not.
We haven't done that a lot. We haven't done that a lot. The question is, at what point, if you have 10 WebDirect users and you got a good machine, does that matter? If you have 20 WebDirects, does that matter? At what point, Wim, do you get concerned that you really need a worker machine? So from everyone's perspective, worker machine is a parallel. Imagine two pieces of hardware, 2 servers sitting side by side. One's the main, quote, main FileMaker server, and the other one is a machine that's going to help process the WebDirect sessions, right, for everyone. So
yep. The main pain point there is setting up the infrastructure, right? Like you got to install the worker machine and hook up the worker machine to the main machine, all of that good stuff. So that's really what holds people back, because if you have to pay for 2 servers and your WebDirect usage fluctuates a lot, you go from 0 to 10 back to 2. Like, does it make sense? In what we do on Selenium and Selenium Cloud is, because all of our infrastructure is AWS, we do this dynamically. Like, as soon as we detect more than a couple of WebDirect users, we spin up a worker, attach it, like within minutes, we have one that's ready. If it's not being used, we scale it back down. We actually destroy it. We throw it away. So for us, these WebDirect workers are entirely dynamic. So for us, it's not a burden, but I get that for a lot of people, that's, if you're not in an environment where you can do this kind of infrastructure dynamically by making API calls to say, I need a server, if it's real hardware, it becomes a whole lot harder to do that. But if you're looking for a cutoff, I would say probably, of course, caveat, it all depends on the design, nature of the solution, the activity of the users. I would say probably if you have more than 5 WebDirect users, start thinking about a worker.
Really? That low of a number? Okay. That's good to know. Good to know. All right, so I'm going to pivot over here. Christian Schmidt from Monkey Bread says, nearly all free memory on your server will be used in the background for file caching. So your container files and database files would be mostly in file caches, is what Christian Schmidt says. David Angel says, is the FileMaker Server cache always dynamic? And I would guess the question is which cache, right? Right?
The database cache isn't. The use of the database cache is, right? Like you pick a number and the default number is half a gig. But FileMaker Server, and you can sort of see like in on the screenshot there, the 2.5 gigs. I'm assuming, Jacob, that you assigned 2 gigs to the DB cache roughly.
I think so. Yeah, I can check, but yeah, it's something in that range. Yeah.
Yep. So you can see that the FileMaker Server database engine process basically says I'm grabbing that 2.5 gigs, right? Because that's mine. Even if you're using like 10% of that, so the 2.5 gigs is not going to be dynamic. FileMaker Server grabs it. Inside that, FileMaker Server is going to use whatever it needs to use, right? So that part is dynamic, but not the allocation of it.
Yeah, and so these items over here are more, in fact, everything else for the most part in here is dynamic, right? With the, exception, right? So, and if we take too much in here, right, we give this too much, well, it just went away. But if you give it too much, you get the idea. You don't want to hog all the memory where you don't need it and then take it away from processes that do. So it's kind of this happy medium kind of deal. But of course, the flip side, you have people who don't change the cache at all. And I've had customers who bought $10,000 servers and they never changed the cache and they want to know why it sucks so bad. And if we change the cache up a couple gigs, they had like 100, 200 gigs unused. You move a couple more gigs into the FileMaker server and suddenly performance takes off. They're like, oh, well, thank you, right? So
yeah, I've provided that advice to several people, several different of our clients that showed up and they bought amazing servers, amazing. I have compliments. I would love one. Somebody should gift me one for Christmas. Yeah. One of these kind of machines, and but they didn't tune it at all. They just installed it and went with their app, and it ran for years. But they showed up on our doorstep going, "Hey, we're looking if we could get some more performance out of this thing. We bought this beefy server. Like, why isn't it just amazing?" And I go in and look, and like one of the things that we do when I do a server audit is I check things like the RAM cache setting and stuff, just to see if it's like, if it makes sense at all. Because if it's default and you have 150 gigabytes of FMP12 and you've got one of the quarter terabytes of RAM and hundreds of users, great. But like if you're on default RAM cache setting, you're probably not getting all you could out of that hardware, politely. And so yeah, you bump it up a little bit and see if the performance doesn't improve. It will. So
it's the main reason that I like the change in behavior in FileMaker Server 21, where the logs are on by default, right? Because we're having the same conversations with clients, right? The client comes to us and say, my solution isn't performing really well. And I'm going like, okay, well, let's have a look at the server. Send me the logs. And they go like, well, there are no logs. So I say, well, turn it on, wait 2 weeks, come back to me. It's a horrible conversation, because now they have to live with the pain for 2 more weeks until we have enough relevant data in the logs to make any sense out of it.
So David Angel says the FileMaker cache can be configured in like FileMaker Pro. So the cache is there. Once again, Jacob, if you can go back up, it's this one highlighted line that affects this one wherever it went. It was just there. But how do we get to change it? It's a command line function, right? It's not a interface.
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
Nope, so it's not any console. Yep.
I have, complained repeatedly on live stream previously, and I will repeat that complaint, which is that box needs to be brought back to the admin console. I don't know if Wim agrees with that or not, but it got dropped in the rewrite of the admin console from 16 to 17.
Yeah.
And so they've brought almost everything back from that period, and then actually further improved. Honestly, the administrative roles and stuff is pretty slick now, much better than it was before. But not everything has been restored, we'll say, and that's one of the things I'll just say I'm missing. I don't know if there's a good reason for not doing that. Basically, perhaps they've evaluated it and found it's more dangerous than useful or something for the average user. But
well, I agree with you. I would love to see it come back. As long as we put it in a place where some context is provided as to what it does exactly, right?
I'm sorry, Wim. Your context will not be provided at all. You just have to guess. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's exactly correct. They should put guidance on the. Yeah.
Just for fun, Jacob, can you do the command line just so people can see the command line on the cache? I don't know if that's hard to do or not. And
yeah,
then,
it'll just be on this one instead of the other one.
yeah, that's fine. Just do it there. If you remember that. I can never remember that command line. And then there was a question that someone had, and I wanted to ask, Wim. So Ed Burkle, the fire chief, as I recall, the normal recommendations is to not run the bleeding edge version of FileMaker Server as our production FileMaker Server. Does that hold true for FileMaker Server 21 that was just released? So what is your thought process on running the absolute latest version of FileMaker Server, Wim?
The thinking there has become a little more difficult since Claris went to the shorter release cycles. Like it used to be when we had the yearly releases, you would typically wait like a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever your risk appetite is there. In the meantime, you'd monitor the community to see like what are people reporting, is it stable, that kind of thing. Now, because the releases come closer together and every release has a combination of new features and bug fixes, you can't really, you don't necessarily want to wait 3 months before you adopt something, right? So I would say pay attention to the release notes, pay attention to what we're doing here as to why some of the things are in there. Definitely pay attention to what is being said about security, right? For instance, like the security patches for 20.3.2, 19.6.4 are absolutely critical. Gotta have them. And you look at the features, like, do you want that feature that is like the execute data API has the power to change how we build solutions? Maybe you want to have some of that server side. That would be good enough reason to do that. Like with most things, like update your dev server first, right? And there's really nothing that I would say that prevents you from updating your development server right now.
Sure.
Right? Because why not, right?
Absolutely agree.
And so do that first, get familiar with that, see if it behaves well in your environment, and then make a decision as to when you want to go to production with that.
All right, I have a suggestion here because we don't have Wim every day, and honestly, if I had Wim for a week, one day a week for the next year, I'd be happy. But let's do this real quick. So let's take a look at cache size real quick, and then we're going to pivot Wim to a conversation about security with this release because we haven't talked about that, and it's not on tap over the next week to really talk about it. So we want to dive into that the last, say, 15, 20 minutes here.
Sure.
Mr. Taylor, can you adjust the cache on this? So it's currently 2,000 megabytes, I guess is what that is?
Yeah, correct.
Up here. So I'm drawing on my little pencil thing right here. There we go.
There you go. I was going to say, I'm not seeing the drawing yet. There you go.
Just set it for something a little less or a little more. I don't particularly care.
Nope.
Yeah, so there's a white paper that came out. We haven't talked about it yet. Yeah, is that working? We can just do that real quick, and we'll pivot forward. Server.
Yeah. Tech issues.
Yeah.
And then pick a number. Let me know.
Do you want us to do 2100 or I don't know, whatever? Come up with whatever number.
1500. We'll turn it down. Just to bother FileMaker Server. So watch this. Actually, let's see if I can get. I'm going to make this bad because you guys won't be able to see the command run. I'm going to do it over here, and we're going to put you see the 2.5?
Yeah.
This will be a cool tech demo. And then I have to see yes. All right. And then I'm going to paste
the password.
And then hit enter so you guys can watch it. Because it should free it and take it down over time. It takes a second.
Up.
So did it do it? Yes, it did. All right. So it's going to see if it does what it usually does. This is usually a tech demo I do for clients because you can bump it. It'll take additional RAM immediately. So like if I had bumped it up to 2500, it'd just immediately grab 500 megabytes of RAM.
Okay.
It's not freeing it though. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, it's thinking about it or whatever.
It usually dumps it. You saw it act though.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely. There's some sort of thought process there, and it kind of what trickled up about what
our megs or something. Yeah, interesting.
Anyway. I don't know. Well, that's how you do it, but subject to change. Who knows? And this is our 20. Is it a different server? This is a
23.2. Yeah, it's not
20.3.2 server. So yeah. But it's the same stuff here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pivot here since now you folks have seen how you do that. So Wim, you and Stephen Blackwell, who's like, I always call him Admiral Blackwell. He's like it's like the godfather of the FileMaker platform. Not a Claris employee, but he's been around forever. So you and him got together and wrote an update to the security conversation about FileMaker Server 21. We don't have a ton of time, but do we want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, probably nothing to show. There's a Claris webinar next week that where we'll talk specifically about security. So that's going to be interesting. So it'll be myself, Doug Wallace, Rosemary. So we'll talk about security. A couple of different things that we wanted to tackle in the white paper is one, to draw attention to those fixes that we just mentioned, right? And Jacob was nodding emphatically. They're that important, right? Like if you're running an older version of FileMaker Server and you're not on at least on 20.3.2 or 1964, like drop everything, get that patched first. It's that important. So we wanted to draw some attention to that. There's information in the supports knowledge base. So if you go to support.claris.com, you can look for those information. There's some CVEs. So there's some security reports on these things. So that was the main goal, to draw attention. The other thing is there are some really good security patches in FileMaker 21, more on the client side than on the server side. We do this all the time on the community where somebody says, I don't like FileMaker security mainly because they don't like the UI of it, so I'll do my own, which what we call ersatz security, roll your own security, right? And we keep saying, like, don't do that. Like, don't do that.
I tried that once. I got burned. So yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So there's a very important patch on the client side where there was exposure of the managed database dialog in a couple of different places where you wouldn't expect it to happen. More typically, they would come out if you're using grant full access to scripts, which I think is widely overused, right? You're trying to put together a privilege set for the user, something's not quite working like you want, and you throw up your hands and say, you know what, I'll just throw full access at the script, problem solved, right? That's the lazy way of doing security. And it can bite you. And that's really one of the patches that was released was to basically unbite you.
That's good stuff. Now, it was funny. So when you roll your own security, and I've always had people who try this. So for those of you who remember, no, you don't remember this. I've told the story a number of times. It's how you get to be old and wise is you're young and stupid. And that's how you get to this place in life where we're at. So Taylor Sharp built a two-factor authentication thing into a sample file. And we kicked it out there, and I said, oh, yeah, so whoever can break into this, I'll give you $200 or whatever it is, and I'll cover it's $200, not a big deal. This is like 10 years ago. And so it was a race between Josh Ormond and Wim Decorte, and I think Josh beat you by 2 minutes, and they broke into this file in like 5 minutes or 6 minutes or some crazy thing like that. And it's because we'd rolled our own security. And if you roll your own security, you're not extraordinarily talented and smart and brilliant, you're going to screw yourself. And so I was happy to pay the money. I was less happy that, because Taylor at the time was building applications that manage nuclear power facilities. And I said, Taylor, please, let's not have these in those systems. So if you read the README anymore, there's a README in there, and I think it was partly a Taylor Sharp thing, is they said you're not allowed to legally use FileMaker in running or managing nuclear power stations. No, it's a Taylor Sharp provision in the end user license contract. So that's part of what we're talking about here. The other part of this, for those of you, I'm just going to share my screen real quick.
I have a unrelated comment on that, which is that no using the software on nuke plants or as it relates to anything that's nuclear power, et cetera. That verbiage also used to be in the iTunes end user license agreement. And I know that because I read it in like 2006, because I'm that sort of person. And I couldn't stop laughing that someone would, put iTunes for playing music or something on the one that runs the processing machines or some, part of the critical infrastructure there for keeping the thing running. It's just, kind of one of those like, oh, that's very funny. And then also someone would definitely do that because they want tunes while they're working or whatever.
Yeah, that's funny stuff. There's a whole history with Steve Jobs and that back in the old days. Real quick, so what Wim's talking about is this checkbox over here. It's not actually that check. Is that checkbox? No, it's
you could just right click and then you'll
right click and then grant full access. So this right here gives it administrative God level privileges, and the little dude shows up over here, whoever that is. That's what that means. So it's already on up here. It gets some information about the setup of the machine, gives it to you. So I turn this on over here. So while this script is running, so I'm gonna state this, women. I need you to judge me and grade me on my presentation. So I write this script, and it doesn't work, and I don't know why it doesn't work. And so you turn this on, And I don't have a problem with turning it on, but then if it turns on, the script works, most people are like, good, I'm done. They walk off. You probably should figure out why that fixed the problem and fix the issue, and maybe not run it as full administration. The issue becomes is where if the script is running and it does something to pause, right? Isn't that what this is about? For a big chunk of this is this pause right here if you're running it as this.
Yep.
And so
not necessarily anything like it doesn't need to be like a pause like this, right? But say that you do an import.
Yeah.
Use the import script step.
Dialogue on, right?
Yeah, exactly. You want to give the user the ability to map the fields and that kind of stuff. This is one of the bad things, right? Like if you look at the dialogue, it's a very busy dialogue, but there's some places there where you can get into the managed database.
Yeah.
No longer with FileMaker 21. So that's kind of scary, right? Because at that point in the script, the user is the developer. It's full access, right? So
yes.
They can go in, create tables, delete fields. Not a good place to be.
So let me restate the obvious parts here that we understand. So by turning this on, from the time your client starts running at line 1 all the way to the point where it ends, assuming it's linear and it goes down here to line 205 or whatever, that during that time and everywhere in between, your client or wherever the client is running as a administrator. And if it ran it and it never stopped and there was never, then maybe that's okay. But if you do something to stop and the script is paused, during that pause in this area in here, you're still an administrator. You could do anything. And if you can get to some place where you're not supposed to be, then that's the problem, because your client is still blessed. It's not the script is blessed, the entire client machine is blessed during this period. That's the operative thing to understand, right, everyone? Yes?
Absolutely. I did a security presentation at Engage, right, back in February, so it's online. I discussed this particular one, but if you haven't watched it, at the beginning, I'm asking a bunch of questions of the audience, right? Like I present the privilege set and say, is the user allowed to do this or that? And pretty much everybody got it wrong. Obviously, I crafted my questions so that the chance of them getting it wrong were higher. But I think it's interesting, right? Like it's security is a that was also the topic, the title of my topic. It's very much an afterthought often. Like we write our scripts to get through a workflow, and then afterwards we go like, oh yeah, I should think about security a little bit, right? So it becomes retrofitting instead of actively thinking of it ahead of time.
I agree. And for brand new, this gets back to what we talk about when we're training brand new beginning people. When you're brand new over here in this area right here, all you care about is that you get it to work at all. It worked at all. It's all we care about. And then somewhere in here, you start worrying about performance and things like that. And then in here or in here, you're like, oh, we need a password. Because first you build it and it works. Then your other people in the company say, oh, that's really amazing. Can you share that with us? Oh, we need a server. Put it on a server. Then everyone has, well, we need a username and password. Well, we'll all share the same username and password, right? The road to hell, right? That's organically how it grows. And I think Wim's a big proponent of thinking about security earlier and often, right? So
absolutely.
But yeah, it's not saying that the brand new I'm not going to tell you you should worried about security. It's like, dude, the calc doesn't even work. Okay, I just want it to work. I want the printout. I want it to work, right? And then someplace after that, people share it, and as soon as that's happening, absolutely, which is where the money and the benefit of Claris comes in, the Claris platform, Claris FileMaker platform. So, question.
I agree. It's like people don't need to be security experts from the get-go, right? It's more an awareness that there is an aspect to building a solution that you may not be ready for right now, but it's there. Just be aware of it.
Is there any application that does analysis of the log files and gives advice? So we kind of talked about that manually today, right? We went through the cache hit and cache. That's why I did that, because I don't know that there's a app that you just install and it's like, auto Wim. It just looks at your logs and says, hey, I'm Wim.
Yep.
Auto Wim AI, right? And it recommends your config.
Two aspects to that. One is collecting enough of that information for longer term, right? Because FileMaker Server collects its logs, but they turn over after a while. So after a couple of, kind of depends on how busy your environment is, you'll lose some of that historical data. So you want to adopt a monitoring tool that will give you and store that information long term, so that you can also use it for things like seeing trends, like how many times does it happen? The interpretation of that, it's a bit of a black art because it takes knowledge of FileMaker Server and how it operates, but it also depends a lot on knowledge of the solution, the nature, the design, the load you put on that. So there isn't something that will be able to interpret that without that context, right? So that context is a conversation between me and my clients to say, I see this, but this could mean good or bad depending on the circumstance. Like if I see an elapsed time of 1 million, is that good or bad? Depends. Like I can't really say, right? It's probably bad because it's a delay of a second for whatever that is. But so I second the thumbs down there from Jacob. But a lot of the interpretation is circumstantial. So it takes somebody with knowledge to help you walk through what that all means.
Yeah. And I actually thumbs down because I'm like, you're waiting a second for something, and that can be bad. However, some of the answers that you get, some of those numbers that you'll get actually tell you things. So for example, if you're looking at, there's one of the elapsed time numbers that captures basically network lag fundamentally, and you'll see numbers around 30 seconds or 30 million, whatever it works out to be in the metric. That's a magic number. That magic number means something timed out somewhere. So you may be talking to an API or something like that, and you're on the server, wherever this is happening, and it's waiting 30 seconds, and then the service isn't responding, and it's going, all right, giving up basically. That can actually tell you things about your running application, though, separate from performance.
Absolutely. We use this all the time because if you marry those numbers from the stat log and the topical stats log to whatever you get out of the DDR, you can build a list of what is that the server is spending most of its resources on. Because let's focus on solving that, right? Like otherwise, people try to do this in the abstract. You see this on the community a lot, where I'm going like, I'll just put more memory in my machine. But if memory is not a constraint, you're throwing away your money, right? Like maybe you should better spend it on faster disks or more cores or faster cores, right? So the numbers don't lie. And if you couple that with knowledge about your solution, you can really very quickly draft like a to-do list of the low-hanging fruit that like the biggest bang from the buck will come from solving whatever is going on with that find in that script, right?
Yeah, frequently it's the design of the code, right? Once again, and that gets into time I spend over here versus here versus here. Throwing more hardware at it almost is rarely, I would say almost, I won't say almost never, but rarely is the magical fix for everything. Put double or triple hardware in, processors and RAM and stuff, and improve the performance 10, 20%. You're like, well, it takes a minute. It needs to be 2 seconds. I had that with me. So not too long ago, I coded a script. It took the script 45 seconds and it was a very simple process that the customer had to do, and was doing some record manipulation. And I knew 50 seconds was a showstopper. And so I knew that throwing more hardware at it wasn't going to solve the problem. And so we took the script, we move it to PSOS, for example, and suddenly it's 11 seconds and it went down to less than a second, so the customer wouldn't really notice it. That's how you solve things like that. So it's frequently a code issue or a design issue on the software side, not better chips or more RAM. But that's also, that's the part you can't totally neglect either. So.
Yeah, but if the hardware is your limitation, then right.
Then you are. It's not a problem until it is, right? It's one of those things. So people like concrete answers, but none of this, it's super.
If you have 100 pros beating on your server all day, and it's like a little dual core with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM or something like that.
Yeah, and people,
my hand,
people want simplicity, right? They want a simple answer, a single silver bullet, right? And it's that. Like it's very often a combination of factors where you go like you cannot solve it with a simple solution just doing one thing, unfortunately.
I don't see any more questions. So Wim, you want to give us a little pitch? So this coming week what are you doing? Where are you going, and what are we doing? How do I find it? If I go to claris.com.
Good question. I think if you go claris.com/security, you may find it. I think if you look for the word security on the Claris website, you should be able to find it. Yeah, I don't know if they have one place where they keep track of all the live streams that they're doing, but that's where that is. That is on next week, Thursday, the 13th.
Can I offer them RCC's event management system?
There we go.
Built in FileMaker.
Scroll down a bit on that one. It may be there somewhere. It's there, just at the top there. Join our live stream on June 13th.
All right. So learn more about Wim Is Blackwell going to be there? Or is it just you?
No, just me, Doug Wallace, and Rosemary.
Oh, Beverly says claris.com/events. Let me try that one. And then you go United States, show all events, I guess. And then, oh, there it is, security right here. So you go to this one and you're going to sign up, and that's episode 3. Cool. All right. Well, I want to thank Wim Decorte for coming on. It has been awesome that you are here. We greatly appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's really good conversation. For those of you wanting to see the streamlined version of this without all the spicy sentence enhancers, the videos come out cleaned up about 24 to 48 hours after the fact. Ms. Taylor, anything else on your end? We good?
Looks good. I think there was only one question we didn't catch, which was somebody's asking, RCC is usually nervous about upgrading to new versions. Does that apply to 21?
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
I think Ken or somebody asked that.
Yeah, and the answer is for sure use it in development. And then what I do is I before I dive into the pool where, or the ocean, I want to make sure that there's no one else being eaten by sharks first. So I look for blood in the water, and if there's no blood, then you're probably okay. But if you see a shark fin,
yeah, I'll probably be putting 21 on our development servers. Honestly, maybe today if I'm bored. But
okay.
After that, it'll be a little bit before I update the production server. But right, for the obvious reason, I like to joke, but I'm not at all joking. That server that I showed earlier pays us.
So, 41, yeah, 41. It's we have a number of servers where the engineers will stage early work before it gets loaded to the customer. All right, anything else from Wim? Are you good?
I'm good.
Sure this was, guys want to upvote Wim. Can I ask a question? Do we want to have Wim come back? Okay, a lot of buzz coming in now. Now they're all upvoting you, Wim. You're now very popular. All right, good. Cool.
I'll be back then.
All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.